For 3 years, everyone called me a useless gold digger. Isabel Sterling's pet project. The man she kept. I never argued because they weren't wrong. I was ready for the day she'd kick me to the curb, prepared to walk away with a king's ransom and severance and never look back. Then her legendary "one that got away" came back to the States. In front of everyone, he pointed a finger at my nose and sneered. "You're nothing but a cheap stand-in. How dare a bottom feeder like you even breathe the same air as my angel?" I was about to play my part, the pathetic, spineless husband, when my billionaire CEO wife kicked him a good 10 feet across the ballroom floor. She ground her heel into his face, looked back at me, and said with chilling calm, "Honey, taser or kneecaps? Your choice." The grand ballroom of the Sterling Tower was a galaxy of shimmering gold and crystal. And I, Leo Vance, legal husband to tonight's hostess, Isabel Sterling, was tucked away in the darkest corner with a small plate of overpriced, tasteless cake. The frosting was too greasy, the sweetness artificial. I mechanically forked a piece into my mouth, my mind already on the end game. My 3-year contract as the Sterling family's kept man was almost up. According to the agreement, I'd get a penthouse overlooking the Hudson, 2 top-of-the-line sports cars, and an Amex Centurion card with no limit. The final payout had to be at least 9 figures, right? After all, this face, this body, for 3 years I had diligently played the role of her obedient and handsome trophy. I'd earned it. Look, there's the pretty boy. Shoo, keep your voice down. It's almost over for him, anyway. I heard the real deal, Julian Croft, flew in today just for this gala. Seriously? The Julian Croft? Isabel's childhood sweetheart? Does that mean this loser is finally getting thrown out? The whispers were just loud enough to reach my ears. I felt nothing. If anything, I wanted to laugh. The leading man was back on set. That meant I, the understudy, could finally collect my paycheck and exit stage left. What was so bad about that? Just then, a commotion erupted at the ballroom entrance. Every head turned. A man in a custom Tom Ford suit, tall and radiating confidence, strode in, flanked by an entourage. He was classically handsome, with an air of old money entitlement. The man the Sterling elders always said was the only one worthy of Isabel. Julian Croft. My real deal. I glanced at my own reflection in a nearby silver tray. Yeah, I could see the resemblance. 3 or 4 parts, maybe. No wonder Isabel Sterling had picked me 3 years ago. Julian basked in the attention, his gaze sweeping the crowd before locking onto me with unnerving precision. He moved through the sea of guests, which parted for him like the Red Sea, faces alight with anticipation for the coming drama. He stopped in front of me, looking down his nose with undisguised contempt, as if sizing up a piece of trash on the sidewalk. "So you're the replacement?" His voice was low, but it carried through our small corner of the room. How pathetic. 3 years of scamming free meals and a roof over your head, all because you look a little like me. How's that feel? Here we go. The classic scene from a script. I was about to summon the required look of a spineless freeloader, a mix of fear and confusion. But Julian leaned in closer, his voice a venomous whisper only I could hear. "Get smart. Walk away on your own. Don't make me get my hands dirty, because then you won't see a single dime." Oh, he wanted to mess with my money. That was a problem. The panicked expression I'd been preparing never made it to my face. A hand, cool and firm, suddenly rested on my shoulder from behind. The chills seeped through the fabric of my suit. The temperature in the entire ballroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. My billionaire CEO wife, Isabel Sterling, had appeared behind me like a phantom. "Did he scare you?" she asked softly, her voice laced with concern. Before I could process this deviation from the script, Julian's face had morphed into a mask of deep affection. "Isabel, you're finally here." He tried to step past me, to meet her eyes. "Don't let this con artist fool you. He's not even worthy of polishing your shoes. I'm the one who truly understands you. Get rid of him." With that, Julian reached out, his hand aiming to shove me aside and pull Isabel toward him. In my peripheral vision, I saw the glint of his Patek Philippe watch. My body tensed, ready to react. But a different shadow, faster and more vicious, cut through the air. Crack! A sickening thud echoed through the hall. Isabel's foot, clad in a silver Jimmy Choo stiletto, had swung up in a brutally efficient arc, planting itself squarely in Julian Croft's chest. Time seemed to freeze. The next second, the dapper, sophisticated Julian Croft flew backward like a discarded duffel bag. He let out a choked scream and crashed into the towering champagne pyramid with a deafening shatter of glass. Golden liquid sprayed everywhere. The ballroom fell into a dead, shocked silence. Everyone stared, wide-eyed, at Julian, who was now a crumpled, groaning heap amidst the broken glass and champagne puddles. Then they looked at the woman who stood, slowly lowering her leg. That was Julian Croft, the heir to the Croft fortune, the man everyone thought was the love of Isabel's life. And he'd just been kicked across the room? Ignoring the horrified gasps, Isabel walked toward him, her heels clicking a sharp, rhythmic tattoo on the marble floor. She loomed over him. Then the glittering, deadly point of her shoe came down, grinding mercilessly onto the back of the hand that had just tried to push me. Eard! Julian's shriek was animalistic. My husband, Isabel's voice was arctic, devoid of any warmth. You think you're worthy of touching him? My brain short-circuited. This was not in the script. In every version I rehearsed in my head, I was the one who got humiliated. She would then step in, diffuse the situation, and later, back home, she'd toss a credit card at me and coldly tell me not to embarrass her again. What was happening? For 3 years, she'd showered me with material wealth, but had always kept me at a distance, like an expensive piece of furniture. I had never, ever seen this side of her, this violent, uncontrollable rage. And it was for me, my severance package. I think it just flew out the window. Isabel didn't even spare Julian another glance. She turned to the security guards who had rushed over. Get him out of here. She paused, then added, use a taser to sober him up. I won't have him making a drunken scene at my event. And call the police. I'm pressing charges for assault and sexual harassment. A collective gasp went through the room. The guards moved fast, hauling the still wailing Julian to his feet and dragging him out. In the dead silence, I walked calmly to the ruined champagne tower, bent down, and picked up a piece of cake that was still mostly intact. As everyone watched, baffled, I walked over to Julian, who was being held by the guards. The venom in his eyes was instantly replaced by terror. WH, what are you doing? I smiled, a clean, gentle smile that perfectly matched the persona I had maintained for 3 years. I reached out, and as his eyes widened in horror, I smeared the cream-covered cake all over his face. Not too hard, not too soft, just a nice, even coating. The movement was as delicate as an artist finishing a masterpiece. Mr. Croft, I said pleasantly, you seem a little heated. Have some dessert. It'll help you cool down. Finished. I dusted the crumbs from my hands and retreated to Isabel's side. It was the first time in our 3-year marriage that I had ever actively caused trouble. I snuck a glance at the woman beside me and caught the barest twitch at the corner of her ice-cold lips. In her frosty eyes, I saw a flash of something I'd never seen before. Approval. The gala had devolved into a farce. Within half an hour, the hashtag Sterling kicks Loverboy for trophy husband was trending globally. Right behind it, hashtag trophy husband goals, cake smear. The stock prices for both Sterling Industries and Croft Corp took a nosedive. The Sterling family's Park Avenue penthouse was lit up like a command center. At the head of a long mahogany table, the family matriarch, old Mrs. Sterling, sat stone-faced, her jade worry beads clicking at a furious pace. An absolute disaster. You've lost your mind. Isabel's uncle, a senior board member, slammed his hand on the table, pointing a finger at her. You assaulted the Croft heir for a piece of arm candy? Do you have any idea how important our merger with Croft Corp is? Isabel, you've disappointed us all. Divorce this gold digger immediately and go apologize to the Crofts. If you don't, you can step down as CEO. Another uncle chimed in. I stood behind Isabel's chair, an invisible fixture, silently absorbing their verbal assault. I realized something. Their anger was real. Their concern for the business was real. This wasn't an act. If I was just a decoy, a tool, Isabel had no reason to let things get this ugly. She certainly had no reason to defy her entire family for me. Isabel lifted her teacup, gently blowing on the steam, not even bothering to look at them. My marriage is not a topic for a board meeting. She set the cup down, her voice quiet but heavy as lead. As for the Crofts, Who are they to deserve an apology? That one sentence shut everyone up. The ride back to our Tribeca penthouse was unnervingly quiet. Once inside, Isabel tossed 2 items onto the marble coffee table. An unlimited black card and a share transfer agreement for a block of Sterling Industries stock. I'm sorry you had to go through that today. She had reverted to her usual cool demeanor, her tone unreadable. This is for your trouble. For 3 years, this was how she operated, using money and things to maintain the fragile link between us. On any other day, I would have quietly accepted, mentally adding it to my grand total. But tonight, I didn't move. For the first time, I didn't look away. I raised my head and stared directly into those bottomless, inscrutable eyes, my heart contracting with a nervous thrum. I asked the question that had been eating at me for 3 years, my voice clear and steady. Isabel, who am I, really? Why me? Julian Croft moved fast, faster than Isabel's PR team could contain the damage. The next day, a massive press conference dominated every news outlet. Under the glare of the spotlights, Julian sat on a stage, his face artfully bruised, a deliberate cut still visible at the corner of his eye. He was playing the part of the devoted, heartbroken victim to perfection. Isabel and I grew up together. What we have can't be compared to some grifter who used deceitful means to climb into her bed. He looked into the cameras, his voice catching, his eyes welling with tears. I don't know what she's been through these past 3 years to be so blinded by a man like that. All I know is that he's only after the sterling money and power. The flash bulbs from the reporters' cameras were blinding. The shutter clicks a constant roar. I stood at the very back of the conference hall, lost in the crowd, an irrelevant spectator. I even had the spare thought that Julian was wasting his talent. He could win an Oscar with a performance like this. Just then, Julian held something up. It was a delicate platinum locket, glittering under the lights. This was our promise to each other. Inside is the most precious photo of us from when we were young. He gazed at the locket with profound love, as if looking at Isabel herself. Isabel, I know you're being forced into this. Just come back to me, and I'll forgive everything. The drama had reached its peak, but the bigger bombshell was yet to come. The doors to the hall swung open. Old Mrs. Sterling entered, leaning on a cane, flanked by Isabel's uncles. The elders of the Croft family followed, right behind them. The two powerful families, united on one stage, a clear show of support for Julian. Mrs. Sterling's sharp eyes scanned the room, finally landing on me in the corner. Her look was one of pure disgust, as if spotting something that needed to be exterminated. In an instant, every camera, every microphone swiveled in my direction, surging toward me like a tidal wave. Mr. Vance, do you have any response to Mr. Croft's accusations? Is it true you only married Ms. Sterling for her money? Both families have made their position clear. Will you step aside voluntarily? I was surrounded. My detached amusement evaporated. This, I thought, was probably the end of the story. 3-year contract fulfilled. I even had my I'll leave without taking a penny speech ready to go. Just as I was about to open my mouth, the crowd parted. Isabel was here. She wore a sharply tailored black pantsuit, her long hair pulled back, her heels clicking with authority. Escorted by a dozen bodyguards, she walked down the aisle as if it were a red carpet laid out just for her. She didn't look at anyone, her beautiful face a blank mask as she ascended the stage. A flicker of triumph crossed Julian's eyes. He rushed to her side. Isabel, you came. Isabel ignored him, snatching the platinum locket from his hand. Everyone held their breath, expecting a moment of tearful reminiscence. The corners of Julian's mouth were already turning up into a smug smile. The next second, Isabel raised her hand and slammed the locket onto the hard marble floor. Crack! The sharp sound amplified through the microphones, stunning the entire room. That wasn't enough. She lifted her foot and brought her sharp heel down on the locket. Once, twice, 3 times, until the delicate piece of jewelry was a mangled, unrecognizable piece of scrap metal. The hall was utterly silent. Isabel finally picked up a microphone, her cold gaze nailing a pale-faced Julian to his seat. Her voice was low, but every word was a hammer blow. Julian Croft, you were never the one that got away. You are my living nightmare. This locket was never a symbol of our love. It's the locket that fell off my little brother, Ryan, 5 years ago when you hit him with your car and left him for dead. And this so-called precious photo inside? On the back is a practice copy of his signature, the one you forged on a fake report to claim he was driving drunk. Boom. The entire conference hall erupted. Amidst the tidal wave of shock and outrage, Isabel did something no one expected. She turned her head, and in front of thousands of cameras, for the first time, she looked at the man who had remained silent in the crowd. Her expression was something close to broken, something like dependence. Her voice was no longer cold. It trembled uncontrollably, but it was perfectly clear. I married Leo Vance, not because he looks like anyone. I married him because 5 years ago, when my brother was wheeled into the ICU and I was collapsing in a hospital hallway, convinced my world was ending, he was the only one there, a total stranger, standing in a corner, crying for a boy he'd never met. She looked at me, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. You were the only light I saw in the abyss. The press conference fell dead silent once more. The cameras, the microphones, all became witnesses to this deafening quiet. Then, an explosion of chaos. Oh my God, Julian Croft was the driver. Forged a drunk driving report? That's attempted murder. No wonder she hates him. This is a blood feud. The flashbulbs went off like a machine gun, illuminating the blood-drained face of Julian Croft. He sat slumped in his chair, lips trembling, unable to speak, his eyes filled with nothing but pure terror. The Sterling elders on stage looked as if they'd been collectively slapped, their faces burning with shame. I stood frozen, thunderclaps going off in my head. 5 years ago, right after I got out of the service. The hospital, the fragments of memory slammed together. I remembered. I'd been passing by Mount Sinai after a meeting and saw a family breaking down around a young man being wheeled out of the ER. The raw, desperate grief of the family had struck a nerve, one still raw from the battlefields I'd just left. I was just a passerby, but an inexplicable wave of sorrow hit me, and I ducked into an alcove, my eyes stinging. So, the young man on that gurney was Isabel's brother. So, she had been there. So, our 3-year marriage wasn't a business transaction. It began with a moment of empathy I couldn't contain. I looked at the woman on the stage. She had just ripped open her deepest wound in the most public way possible. Her body was trembling, not with power, but with the exhaustion that comes after expending every last ounce of strength. I didn't hesitate for another second. I strode forward, every camera tracking my movement, and stood in front of her, shielding her from the prying eyes of the world. I reached out and steadied her shaking frame. It was the first time in 3 years we had been this close, close enough for me to feel the chill of her skin, the tremor running through her body. I didn't say a word. I just tightened my grip on her cold hand, took the microphone from her, and turned to face the press. My eyes were calm, but my voice held an ironclad authority. From this day forward, if anyone dares to touch a single hair on my wife's head, I will make them regret being born. In that instant, the docile, harmless aura of the trophy husband vanished. In its place was the cold, hard edge of a man forged in blood and fire. The entire hall fell silent. Back at the penthouse, the massive crystal chandelier cast a cool light. Isabel kicked off her heels, walked barefoot to the bar, and poured herself a stiff scotch, downing it in one gulp. She finally spoke, her voice raspy from the alcohol. My brother's accident. The Crofts used their power to bury it, ruling it an accident. I needed a decoy, a target that looked safe, harmless, to draw their attention while I investigated in the shadows. She turned, facing me. The ice in her eyes finally melted, revealing the profound exhaustion and vulnerability hidden beneath. But then I saw you at the hospital that day, a complete stranger, crying for my brother. In that moment, I changed the plan. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I looked at the woman before me, all her walls finally down. All the confusion, the calculations, the distance of the last 3 years, it all made sense now. Billionaire CEO, queen of industry, none of it mattered. She was just a woman who had carried the weight of a 5-year vendetta, all alone, to get justice for her family. I walked over, took the glass from her hand, and set it aside. This kind of thing, my voice was soft but unshakably firm. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. Isabel looked up, meeting my gaze. There was no pity in my eyes, no sympathy. Only pure, undiluted protectiveness and an unbreakable promise. Her eyes, without warning, turned red. For the first time, they sat together as true partners, piecing together every lead they had on the Croft family. Her business acumen, his tactical mind, a perfect fusion. Late that night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, short and to the point. A corner dog will bite. The Crofts put a price on your head, and your wife's. The streets were quiet, the city settling into the deep of night. Isabel's Rolls-Royce glided through the empty avenues. She was leaning back with her eyes closed, drained from the day's events. I sat beside her, a silent presence. Crunch, a violent impact threw the car sideways. The immense inertia sent Isabel lurching forward. A powerful arm instantly wrapped around her waist, pinning her securely to the seat. The squeal of tortured tires filled the air as a black SUV slammed into our rear quarter panel, swerving to block our path. Two more cars boxed us in from the front and back, cutting off all escape. "Protect Ms. Sterling," the bodyguard in the front seat yelled, throwing his door open. But they were prepared. 7 or 8 men armed with steel pipes and machetes jumped out of the vehicles. Without a word, they descended on our 2 bodyguards with lethal force. Our men were professionals, but they were outnumbered and overwhelmed in seconds, blood already staining their suits. Smash! The driver's side window exploded inward, showering us with glass. A man with a brutish face leaned in, a grotesque grin spreading across his features. "Ms. Sterling, the boss want a word. Come quietly and no one else gets hurt." Isabel's face was ashen. She was a titan of the boardroom, but this was the stuff of nightmares. Just as a grimy hand reached for her, I, the silent husband, moved. "Get back." The thug paused, then sneered. "And who the hell are you, pretty boy?" His words were cut short. Snap! A clean, sharp crack of bone echoed in the night. My hand had shot out the broken window, clamped onto the man's wrist, and twisted down with brutal efficiency. The man's arm bent at an impossible angle. He screamed, a raw, piercing sound of agony. I didn't stop. I kicked my door open, moving in a blur of motion. My foot connected with the screaming man's knee, and he crumpled to the ground. Another attacker swung a steel pipe at my head. Without looking, I sidestepped, my elbow snapping up in a vicious arc that connected perfectly with his throat. His eyes bulged. He collapsed, clutching his neck, making only a choked, gurgling sound. The whole exchange took less than 3 seconds. The remaining thugs froze, staring in disbelief. This was the legendary gold digger who supposedly just served tea and did laundry. This guy was more dangerous than they were. "Get him! Take him down!" Someone yelled, his voice laced with fear. They summoned their courage and swarmed me. I dropped into a low fighting stance, a posture honed by 1,000 brutal training sessions. A palpable killing intent radiated from me. I moved like a tiger unleashed on a flock of sheep. Every strike was clean, efficient, and aimed at a vital point. The sounds of cracking bones, muffled groans, and pained cries filled the air. In less than a minute, it was over. Every attacker was on the ground, nursing broken limbs, their moans a pathetic chorus. And I stood in the center of the carnage, untouched, not even a wrinkle on my suit. I turned, the terrifying aura vanishing as if it had never been there. I was back to being the gentle, harmless man she knew. I opened her door and extended my hand. "Did I scare you?" Isabel just stared at me. She looked at the face she had known for 3 years, then at the bodies littering the pavement. Her mind was a complete blank. This was the man everyone mocked as a useless, kept bird in a golden cage. The silence in the penthouse was suffocating. Isabel had the family doctor treat the small scrape on the back of my hand, then dismissed everyone. The 2 of us were alone. "You?" Isabel finally spoke, her voice dry. "Who are you?" I handed her a glass of warm water, deciding there was no point in hiding anymore. "I was a Navy SEAL." My tone was flat, matter of fact. "I was injured on a mission a few years back. Took a medical discharge." Isabel clutched the glass, her fingertips cold. She thought back to why she had chosen me. His background was clean. An orphan with no family, a gentle disposition, easy to control. She never imagined that behind that simple resume was a past this violent, this dangerous. A wave of fear washed over her. If he hadn't been here tonight. But after the fear came a sense of security she had never known. She hadn't picked up a gentle canary. She had, by pure instinct, found a lion who had hidden his claws and teeth, guarding her all along. The Crofts. Isabel's voice turned deadly cold. They're digging their own graves. Yes, I said. Leave it to me. The next day, I dialed a number I hadn't touched in years. It's me, Wolf. I need you to run a check on someone. Julian Croft and the entire Croft family. I want all their dirt. The darker, the better. On the other end of the line was my former brother-in-arms, now a high-ranking official at the NSA. At the same time, Isabel convened an emergency meeting of the Sterling Industries Board. From this moment on, we are launching an all-out assault on every Croft-held asset. Spare no expense. I want them wiped off the map within a month. The iron fist of the CEO unsheathed and sharpened. A pincer movement orchestrated by husband and wife began to close around the Croft family. One in the light, using the tidal wave of capital to crush their business empire. One in the shadows, using lightning-fast intelligence to unearth every crime buried in their past. The Crofts were caught completely off guard. Their stock plummeted, negative press consumed them, and partners terminated contracts en masse. They realized, with dawning horror, that they hadn't provoked a simple gold digger and a lovesick woman. The Crofts' retaliation was faster than expected, but they made one fatal miscalculation. Leo Vance was not a man who waited to be attacked. Found him. In the study, I pointed at a file on the computer screen without looking up at Isabel. Mark Peterson, one of the cops on the scene of the accident 5 years ago. 3 days after the incident, he resigned for family reasons and then vanished. Next to the file was a bank statement. On the day Peterson resigned, his nearly empty savings account received a deposit of $500,000 from Shell Corporation, a corporation that traced back to Croft Corp. Hush money, Isabel stated. He's in Scranton, Pennsylvania now, a forgotten little town about 3 hours from here. I closed the laptop and stood up. Let's go pay him a visit. I'm coming with you, Isabel said without hesitation. Scranton looked like a place time had forgotten. We found the address, a grimy, dilapidated apartment building. We knocked for a long time before the door opened a crack. A sallow-faced, shifty-eyed, middle-aged man peered out. It was Peterson. When he saw our expensive clothes, his face went white. He tried to slam the door shut. Thud! My hand shot out, blocking the door. Officer Peterson, relax. We're not with the Crofts. I don't know any Crofts. You got the wrong guy. Peterson's voice was shrill with panic. As he struggled to close the door, several black vans screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. The door slid open and 8 men with steel pipes jumped out, heading straight for the building. The Crofts were here, too. Go. My face hardened. No more time for talk. I grabbed Isabel's wrist and pulled her toward the other end of the hallway. Behind us, we heard the frantic thud of footsteps and the grating sound of metal dragging on concrete. The town's alleys were a narrow, winding maze. Tugging Isabel along, I relied on pure military instinct, navigating the labyrinth at a dead run. This way, I kicked open the back door to a fish market, the damp, rank smell hitting us in a wave. A thug caught up from the side, a pipe whistling through the air, aimed at the back of Isabel's head. My eyes flashed. I yanked Isabel into my arms, spinning to deliver a brutal elbow strike to the man's throat. He crumpled like a prawn, unable to make a sound. But that brief pause gave another attacker an opening. A heavy blow landed squarely on my lower back. Ugh! I let out a grunt, my body staggering. It was the exact spot of my old injury from the service. White-hot pain shot up my spine, flooding my system. My face went pale, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Leo! Isabel screamed, seeing a look of such agony on my face for the first time. The calm and reason in her eyes were instantly consumed by a towering rage. As the next pipe swung toward us, Isabel didn't run. She lunged forward, grabbed a crate of freshly caught fish from a nearby stall, and hurled it with all her might. Icy water and slimy fish drenched the attacker, who slipped and fell hard. Isabel didn't waste a second. She grabbed my arm, slinging it over her slender shoulders, taking most of my weight. Hold on. Supporting each other, we limped out of the market. Behind us, Peterson watched it all, his face a mask of terror and conflict. The Crofts had really sent people to kill him. He gritted his teeth, made a decision, and ran off in a different direction. We ran until the sounds of pursuit faded, then ducked into an abandoned warehouse. I slid down a wall, gasping for breath, the back of my t-shirt soaked with sweat. Isabel knelt, her hand hovering over my back, afraid to touch the injury, afraid she'd cause more pain. Just then, the warehouse door creaked open. Peterson peeked in. Seeing us, he stumbled forward and dropped to his knees. "Don't kill me. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything." He was terrified by the Crofts' brutality, but he'd also been moved by our desperate determination. Trembling, Peterson pulled a small object from his coat, wrapped in layers of wax paper. It was a USB drive. This is the original incident report from the scene, all the raw photos, and a recording of Julian Croft paying me off. I recorded it secretly, in case they ever tried to silence me. The official report was a lie. They forced me to falsify it. Isabel snatched the USB drive, her knuckles turning white as she clenched it in her fist. The smoking gun. This was the evidence that would bury Julian Croft for good. At that exact moment, her phone vibrated wildly. It was the hospital. Isabel answered, and the doctor's voice came through, breaking with excitement. "Ms. Sterling, it's a miracle, a medical miracle. Your brother, Ryan's finger just moved. His brainwave activity is off the charts. He might be about to wake up." Boom. Isabel felt the world go silent. Slowly, she turned her head and looked at me, leaning against the wall, offering her a weak smile. 5 years of hatred, 5 years of despair, 5 years behind a mask of ice. In that single moment, it all came crashing down. Fat tears rolled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. It was a smile of tears, of joy, of profound relief. A smile both fragile and radiant. The dawn, at long last, was breaking. The second press conference had no Q&A. Isabel stood in the spotlight and slapped a USB drive onto the podium. On this drive is the complete evidence of Julian Croft's attempted murder of my brother, Ryan Sterling, 5 years ago. This includes audio recordings of him bribing a police officer and falsifying an accident report, as well as the bank transfers. I have already submitted a copy to the NYPD. Her words, amplified by the microphones, echoed through the hall and across every live stream. Hashtag Julian Croft attempted murder. Hashtag real life succession drama. Hashtag justice for Ryan. The trending topics on Twitter were utterly dominated. The storm had begun. Trading for Croft Corp stock was halted at the opening bell, its value having evaporated by billions in a single second. Faxes terminating partnerships flooded their corporate offices. Calls from banks demanding repayment lit up their phone lines. The once obsequious managers now sounding colder than the Grim Reaper. The collapse of a commercial empire can happen in a day. The Croft family descended into chaos. Julian's parents and uncles turned on each other, desperately trying to pin all the blame on him. They even started leaking other internal family scandals to divert attention, trying to cut ties with the sinking ship of a murderer. When a wall is failing, everyone gives it a push. The entire high society of New York reveled in the Crofts' downfall. And Julian Croft, the architect of his own destruction, finally snapped. He smashed everything in his mansion, his eyes bloodshot, muttering over and over, "Traitors. There are traitors among you. Why did you betray me?" He couldn't understand how his flawless plan had been unraveled by a worthless, kept man. Meanwhile, the legal and financial teams from Sterling Industries officially moved into the Croft Corp headquarters, beginning the process of asset liquidation and acquisition. Isabel sat in what was once Julian's office, coldly reviewing the documents. Suddenly, she paused, pulling an inconspicuous folder from a pile of abandoned project proposals. The project name was strange, Project Prometheus. She opened it. Her pupils contracted. The project's summary was chilling. A feasibility study on emotional transference and memory implantation. Isabel flipped through the pages, a cold dread washing over her. This wasn't a business study. It was a sick, twisted psychological experiment designed to use suggestion and technology to perfectly transplant one person's feelings for a deceased individual onto another. When I got home that night, Isabel was on the sofa, the folder spread out before her face pale. "What's wrong?" She didn't speak, just pushed the folder toward me. I picked it up and scanned it, my brow furrowing. The soldier in me smelled extreme danger. Financed by Julian? Yes. 4 or 5 years. It started right after my brother's accident. Isabel's voice was tight. A terrifying thought surfaced in both our minds at once. Could this project have something to do with Isabel? Or more specifically, with me, the replacement? Just then, her assistant called, her voice frantic. "Ms. Sterling, Julian Croft. He's gone. The police went to his house, but he's vanished. All the security footage was destroyed." Isabel hung up and looked at me. The storm seemed to have passed, but the ensuing quiet was more unsettling than the chaos. "He didn't vanish," I said. "He's hiding, like a snake in the grass, waiting to strike." Ryan Sterling, who had been in a coma for 5 years, miraculously woke up the day after the evidence against Julian was released. Though still incredibly weak, when the police questioned him, he used all his strength to clearly identify his attacker, Julian Croft. For the first time in years, the VIP hospital room was filled with warmth. Isabel was peeling an apple, her movements clumsy but focused. For the first time, she had shed her armor of ice and was just a big sister. I stood by, silently tucking the blanket around Ryan's shoulders. "Leo." Ryan's voice was raspy, but he said my name with an easy familiarity. He looked at me with sincere gratitude. "Thank you." Hearing my name from him made Isabel's hand pause, a faint blush creeping up her neck. I just smiled and patted his hand. No word were needed. Ryan took a breath, then shot his sister a teasing look. "So, Izzy, when are you two going to give me a nephew? I'm getting impatient here." The atmosphere in the room turned a little awkward. Isabel, flustered for once, stuffed a piece of apple in his mouth. "You just woke up and you're already running your mouth." Just then my phone vibrated. It was an encrypted message from my old contact at the NSA. He'd found a lead on a deeply hidden black market operation run by the Crofts. The informant wanted to meet immediately at the Red Hook Piers. I frowned. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. But I couldn't pass up any chance to put the final nail in the Crofts' coffin. "Babe, I have to step out. Something urgent." I stood up. "You and Ryan stay here. Don't go anywhere." I handed Isabel a pen, one that looked perfectly ordinary. "Keep this on you, just in case." She didn't ask questions, just nodded and took the pen. Less than half an hour after I left, the hospital room door opened quietly. A figure in a nurse's uniform, wearing a surgical mask and cap, pushed a medicine cart in. "Mr. Sterling, time for your medication," the nurse said, their voice muffled. Isabel was looking down at a report and didn't pay much mind. But as the nurse approached the bed, they whipped a cloth soaked in ether from under the cart and clamped it over Ryan's mouth and nose. Ryan, too weak to struggle, let out a single muffled sound before going limp. "What are you doing?" Isabel shot up, her voice sharp. The figure ignored her, slung the unconscious Ryan over their shoulder, and bolted for the door. Isabel tried to give chase, but was blocked by the overturned cart, its contents scattered across the floor. By the time she got around it, the hallway was empty. Her heart plummeted. Her phone buzzed violently. An unknown number. She answered. Julian Croft's crazed, distorted voice came through the line. "Isabel, you want your brother to live. Come to the abandoned factory in Queens. The one where we used to play hide and seek. And remember, you come alone. If you call the cops, or if you bring that useless husband of yours, the next time you see your brother, it'll be in a body bag." The line went dead. Isabel stood clutching her phone, her knuckles white. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She walked to the window and looked out toward Queens. Then, she clicked the cap of the pen. Meanwhile, at the Red Hook Piers, I stood before a stack of empty shipping containers, the sea wind whipping at my jacket. After 10 minutes, I knew I'd been had. It was a diversion. My blood ran cold. I immediately called Isabel. No answer. A chilling dread shot up my spine. I pulled up an app on my phone, a red that was moving rapidly across the map, heading straight for an old industrial park in Queens. "Julian," I slammed my fist into a container, the metal groaning in protest. Without a second's hesitation, I sprinted to my car. The engine roared to life, and I tore out of the docks, chasing the red dot. Inside the abandoned factory, dust motes danced in the beams of light slanting through the broken roof. Isabel walked in alone, her heels crunching on the debris-strewn floor. In the center of the factory, Ryan was tied to a rusty iron chair, a gag in his mouth, his eyes closed. Julian stood beside him. The once dashing heir now looked like a madman, hair disheveled, eyes shot with blood, a sick, twisted smile on his face. When he saw Isabel, his smile widened. "Isabel, you came." He stood up, a strange glint in his eye, toying with a faded old photograph. Isabel's heart sank, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Julian, let my brother go. I'm the one you want." "Want?" Julian laughed, as if he'd heard the funniest joke in the world. He stalked toward her, holding the photo up. "Look, you look so much like her. Identical." In the photo was a smiling young girl who, indeed, shared a strong resemblance to Isabel. "It was never you I loved." Julian's voice turned shrill. "I love my sister, my twin sister who died. And you, Isabel Sterling, you were just her replacement." The bombshell left Isabel reeling. It all finally made sense, his years of obsessive fixation. "So, when you hit my brother." "Yes." Julian's face was contorted with hate. He roared, "He found out my secret. He dared to laugh at me. Trash like him deserved to die. I just wanted you to stay with me forever, to be with me like she was. Why does everyone betray me? Why?" He broke down completely, screaming and crying like a cornered animal, just as he lunged toward Ryan, ready to finish the job. Crash! A black silhouette burst through a second-story window, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. I landed in a crouch amidst the falling glass, my eyes not even glancing at Isabel, my entire being focused on Julian with pure, murderous intent. Julian Croft. The two words were so cold, they barely sounded human. Julian froze for a second, then his madness intensified. "You worthless piece of trash. You came to die too? Fine. Today you, your wife, and her brother can all go to hell and keep my sister company." He screamed, pulling a rusty lever on the wall. Whoosh! A massive iron hook swung down from the ceiling, aimed directly at me. I rolled, dodging it by a hair's breadth. Julian had already grabbed a steel pipe and was charging. I dropped all pretense, unleashing the full extent of my training. I weaved, blocked, and struck, every movement economical and lethal. The factory, filled with old machinery, became a deadly obstacle course. "Leo, you're left. There's a maintenance ditch behind those barrels." Isabel yelled, her childhood memories of this place flooding back. I heard her, pushed off a crate, and vaulted over Julian's wild swing. We moved in a deadly dance of cat and mouse through the industrial graveyard. Julian roared again, hurling a heavy gear not at me, but at Isabel. I changed direction instantly, tackling Isabel to the ground, taking the full impact of the gear on my back. A grunt escaped my lips, and I tasted blood. "Leo." Isabel's voice trembled. "Quiet. Watch your brother." I snarled, pushing myself up, my own attacks suddenly ferocious. No more dodging. I met him head-on, closing the distance with a speed and power that Julian couldn't comprehend. Crack! A sharp chop to his wrist sent the pipe flying. A clean shoulder throw slammed him onto the concrete floor. Before he could react, my knee was on his throat, pinning him. It was over. Julian lay on the ground like a broken doll, still muttering "Sister. Sister." His fight completely gone. I quickly got up, ran to Ryan, and cut him loose. Isabel rushed to her brother's side, holding him tight, the tears finally coming in a flood of relief. Outside, the wail of sirens grew closer and closer. The list of Julian Croft's crimes was long. Attempted murder, kidnapping, extortion. The gavel came down on a life sentence. It was the final blow to the Croft name. The once mighty empire, crushed under the weight of scandal and evidence, imploded. Back at the Sterling penthouse, the uncles who had once sneered at me now offered me tea with awkward, fawning smiles. The matriarch, Mrs. Sterling, personally poured me a cup of their finest tea, her voice laced with a grudging respect. "Leo, we were foolish. Please, don't hold it against us." I said nothing, just took a sip of the tea. My silence was answer enough. At the hospital, Ryan's recovery was astonishing. As his body healed, his sharp tongue returned. Watching me peel an apple for Isabel, he leaned in conspiratorially. Leo, my sister's been an ice queen her whole life. You've really had your work cut out for you, he whispered. Seriously, though, when are you two going to get to work on that nephew I asked for? Isabel shot him a death glare. Ryan just grinned and gave me a thumbs up. The room was filled with laughter. A few days later, Isabel took me to a quiet cemetery. Dad, Mom, she said softly, standing before two headstones, her voice calmer than I'd ever heard it. Ryan's awake. He's going to be okay. She paused, then turned and took my hand, lacing her fingers through mine. This is Leo, my husband, the man I love. It wasn't a long introduction, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. It was the first time she had formally brought me into the most private part of her world. That night, back at the penthouse, with the weight of her vendetta finally lifted, Isabel seemed to melt. A human warmth began to seep through the cracks in her armor. She tried to cook, nearly setting the kitchen on fire and producing a breakfast that looked like charcoal. She saw me talking a little too long with a female executive at the office and spent the rest of the day radiating a palpable, I am not pleased aura. I saw her right through her little games and didn't say a word. That night, I just pulled her into my arms and held her tight, using actions, not words, to reassure her until the sun came up. I had long since forgotten about the gold digger label. I accepted Isabel's offer and officially joined Sterling Industries as executive vice president. I was no longer the man hiding behind the CEO, but the partner standing beside her. Together, we took the company to unprecedented heights. After the Croft family's assets were liquidated, I was tasked with sorting through a few of Julian's personal effects from safe deposit box. I was about to have it all incinerated when I came across that same faded photograph. The young Julian and his twin sister, smiling. I sighed and was about to toss it when my finger brushed against writing on the back. I turned it over and froze. On the back of the photo was a single, bold signature. A signature I knew as well as my own. It was my father's. I drove home, the old photograph in my pocket feeling like a lead weight. My father, George Vance, was on the sofa watching TV, looking like any other retiree in America. I walked over, placed the photo on the coffee table, and slid it in front of him. The photo of the smiling Croft twins. On the back, the unmistakable signature, George Vance. The sound from the TV suddenly seemed deafening. The color drained from my father's face. The teacup in his hand trembled, spilling hot liquid on his pants, but he didn't seem to notice. Where did you get this? His voice was a dry rasp. From Julian Croft's belongings, I said, my tone quiet but firm. Dad, you told me you were a factory worker your whole life. My father squeezed his eyes shut, his face a canvas of pure agony. The silence was crushing. Finally, in a broken whisper, he confessed the secret he had buried for a lifetime. Decades ago, he wasn't a factory worker. He was one of the country's most elite private security specialists. His call sign was Anchor. His assignment was protecting the Croft family. The day Julian's sister fell from the balcony, he had been distracted for a single, fatal second. He hadn't been fast enough to catch her. The guilt consumed him. He erased his past, took me, his young son, and disappeared, becoming an anonymous blue-collar worker, living forever in the shadow of that one failure. So, Isabel's team couldn't find anything on my background, not because they were incompetent, but because you wiped it clean, I murmured. So, none of it was a coincidence. Was it a cruel twist of fate, or some kind of cosmic redemption? I didn't know. I only knew I had to tell Isabel. In her office, I laid out the whole story, not making a single excuse for my father, just stating the facts. When I finished, I looked down, unable to meet her eyes. I was afraid that this tangled mess from a generation past would become an uncrossable chasm between us. Isabel was silent for a long, long time. The office was so quiet I could hear my own heart pounding. Just as my hope began to sink, she stood up, walked over, and took the photo from my hand. Ryup. She tore it in half, and again, until it was a pile of confetti, which she unceremoniously dropped into the trash can. She reached out, cupped my face in her hands, and forced me to look at her. What does our parents' past have to do with us? Her voice was soft, but it resonated with absolute certainty. All I know is that when I was in the darkest hole of my life, and the whole world was waiting for me to fail, you were the one who pulled me out. Leo, she said, that's all that matters. All secrets, all burdens dissolved in that moment. A month later, a wedding of spectacular proportions made headlines around the world. Isabel Sterling, in the most public way imaginable, announced to everyone that Leo Vance was not her pet, not a substitute for anyone, but her one and only love, the one true light of her life. At the reception, a fully recovered Ryan was the loudest member of the Leo fan club, leading cheers and toasts that kept the party roaring. The Sterling family elders, who had once looked at me with contempt, now smiled with genuine warmth, respectfully calling me Mr. Vance. At our villa by the sea, the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and red. Isabel leaned against my chest, feeling the steady beat of my heart. She tilted her head up, a mischievous glint in her eye. Hey, still calculating your severance package. I looked down, smiled, and captured her lips in a kiss that was deep and slow and left us both breathless. After a long moment, I rested my forehead against hers, my voice a low, possessive rumble. I stopped counting a long time ago. Because you're never getting rid of me. Everything I have, everything I am, it's all yours.